Once in a while, as I go through many books, I actually could find something I could read to you. This particular book, I had to go through 254 pages before I got to the section where I have no problem sharing with you. This one happens to be about warfare. This section. Let me set the stage first, quickly. What I'm about to read to you is concerning how Moses was chosen to be an instrument that God would use to deliver the Israelites from Egypt. How he would be the instrument that God would use to provide deliverance from bondage as slaves in the Egyptian Empire. So with that background, I'm going to just start reading to you. I'll have some comments here and there, but I thought this was a great way to start this year, 2022, with a warfare mindset. A spiritual warfare mindset. Moses delivered a nation of slaves from 400 years of slavery in Egypt. Well, God delivered them. Moses was just the instrument. So I make that correction right from the beginning. Moses, like I said, was just the instrument, the human instrument that God chose and used to deliver the Israelites from slavery. Before he goes in to see Pharaoh, he argues with God and gives him all the reasons why he should choose someone else. How many times you've been facing something you definitely want no part of because you know it comes with a cost. But deep down inside you know that God has chosen you to participate in whatever that is. Before you get to the point where you accept the fact there's no escape, there's no running from it, whatever God chose you to be a part of, or whatever he chose for you to do, you get in that back and forth argument with the Lord also. And you start making all types of excuses of why he should choose someone else. Whether it's lack of abilities, maybe a lack of finances, whatever it is. You got your excuses all lined up. Why God should overlook you and move on to someone else. And then if he happens to do that, I've known people that sit back and start justifying the reasons why that was the right thing that God did. Let me continue. He argues with God and gives him all the reasons why he should choose someone else. God says, "What's that in your hand?" Moses eyes a shepherd's staff. God says, "Throw it down." He does, whereupon it immediately turns into a serpent, scaring Moses. Armed with this, he and Aaron go before Pharaoh. Now this is not telling you the complete story. It's kind of paraphrasing along the way and leaving some things out, but you get the meaning behind all this. You will get it. He does, whereupon it immediately turns into a serpent, scaring Moses. Armed with this, he and Aaron go before Pharaoh, telling him to let my people go. Unimpressed, Pharaoh brings forth his magicians, Janus and Jambres. When Moses tells Aaron to throw down his staff and it turns into a serpent, they do likewise. Imagine Moses' surprise when Aaron's snake is joined by two more. Do you think in that moment he had a few questions for God? Evil has power too, given it by God Most High, or allowed by God Most High, I think. Probably is a better way of saying that. No, I don't entirely understand that. I just know it to be true. But watch what happens next. Aaron's snake eats their snakes. So when they leave the palace that afternoon, Jannes and Jambres have no staffs, and Aaron's staff is twice as thick. The point is, the deliverance from Egypt was a clash of powers, and Moses represented the power that was more powerful. But notice the requirement. Moses had to exercise the power given him in order to bring about the deliverance. Meaning he did not just stand there and watch God idly from the sideline. Way too many Christians in 2022 are watching from the sidelines. I really don't even have to point out the various ways you're watching. If God's still tugging at your heart, you know what those things are. You're avoiding. You know the excuses that you've been making. I guess the message is, stop being a sideliner. You're letting time go by. Missing out. The wonderful opportunity God is giving you, and whatever He has assigned you to be part of. Whatever He wants to accomplish in you personally and for the cause of Christ. There's no time. There's not much time left to be idling on the sidelines. What follows the greatest display of power against the power the world has, the greatest display of power against power the world has ever seen. In the first plague, Moses tells Aaron to hold out his now thicker staff over the waters of Nile. See, Pharaoh was not impressed. A rod or a staff turning into a snake. His magicians were able to do the same thing. Now, did it actually turn into a snake? We don't know. Or was it the illusion of a snake? No one really knows. It really doesn't matter. It accomplished what it needed to accomplish, but Pharaoh's people were able to match it. The only thing they couldn't do is Moses or Aaron's staffs that turned into a snake were able to devour the other two. But that didn't change Pharaoh's mind. He wasn't impressed. Moses tells Aaron to hold out his now thicker staff of the waters of the Nile, and the water turns to blood, and all the fish die. Now, I just did a teaching on the blood and water. And as I read this, and when I read things like this, I can't help but not catch whether it's innuendo or it is what it is if you listen to the teaching. But water turns to blood. Okay, we got that. But what happens after that? All the fish die. If we had eternal water as a circulatory system and it turned into blood because of obviously eating of the forbidden fruit, and it became not just blood but poisonous blood, what happens? It started the death clock. Here, Moses tells Aaron to hold out his now thicker staff of the waters of the Nile, and the water turns to blood, and all the fish died. Those of you who listen to that teaching know exactly what I'm referring to. And Egypt stinks. Jannes and Jambres stand unfazed, though, but the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. Well, they were able to do the same thing. Moses and Aaron returned to Pharaoh. Aaron stretches out his hand over all the rivers, canals and pools, and immediately frogs come up and cover the land of Egypt. But the magicians did the same by their secret arts and made frogs come up out in the land of Egypt. So far, everything that's happened in these plagues didn't impress Pharaoh. Just think about it. If he can have his own people do the exact same thing, why should you listen to Moses and Aaron? What was so special about them? In Pharaoh's mind, he probably thought Moses learned some magical tricks the 40 years he was gone when he ran from Egypt before his return. Notice, until now, the magicians of Egypt are matching Moses and Aaron power for power. Moses and Aaron have got to be wondering what the Lord has, why and what the Lord has brought them to. Nevertheless, they responded obediently. Aaron stretches out his staff a third time and strikes the dust, strikes his staff on the ground, and strikes the dust so the particles became gnats. Hang on. Magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats also, but they could not. But they could not. Aha, we finally get to a plague where the magicians couldn't produce what Moses and Aaron were able to produce with God's power. And what's that? See, evil cannot produce life. It can destroy life, but it can't produce life. And in this plague, from the dust of the earth rose gnats. From dust to a life form. And those magicians could not match it. Only then, the magicians, when they could not match the power of Moses and Aaron, did they turn to Pharaoh and say, "This is the finger of God." At least they had sense for that. Notice the phrase, finger of God. We will hear this again through the mouth of Jesus in the New Testament. Jannes and Jambres succeeded with the serpent, blood, and frogs, but failed with gnats. My point is this: evil had real power. It was not impotent or powerless. And defeating that power required belief, obedience, and doing. Back to our context. Moses extracts Israel from the hand of Pharaoh by the exercise of power, the likes of which the world had never seen. Not the least of which is parting the Red Sea and walking across on dry ground, only to turn around and watch a 10-story wall of water wipe out the strongest army any of the Israelites had ever imagined. After systematically dismantling the gods of Egypt, 3 million Hebrews walked out of Egypt and into the desert. Once freed, Moses sent spies into the promised land. 12 men, all leaders of their tribes, 2 of whom are Joshua and Caleb. The spies spy out the land and return with good and bad news. The good news is that the land is better and more fruitful than they could have imagined. Flowing with milk, honey, grapes. It's paradise. They never seen its equal. The bad news is that the land is populated with giants. And because the people choose to listen to the 10 doubtful spies rather than Joshua and Caleb, they spend the next 40 years in the wilderness. With a new generation, after that 40 years, ready to do what the last would not, Joshua takes over command from Moses, enters the promised land, and God tasks Joshua transforming a nation of slaves into a nation of priests. And the first thing required of them is to fight for what God promised them. To fight for what God promised them. Fighting giants. Listen to what God tells Joshua. And if you want to read it for yourself at a later time, and I'll just read it to you now, it's Joshua 1, first chapter, verses 2 through 9. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over to this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward going down to the sun, shall be your territory. That's what God promised them. And I've covered this in the last day teaching. The Israel that you see now in the Middle East, it's barely half its size that it should be. And I believe, before all is said and done, before Jesus' second coming, Israel will expand its borders to the dimensions that God intended for Israel to have. We haven't seen that yet. So there's some work still to do before the Lord's return. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land. You're going to cause them to inherit the land. And it's going to require some fighting. Well, I'd just rather sit back and pray. And you need to pray, don't get me wrong. With all prayer and supplication. But you need to pick up the spiritual weaponry that God has provided us that's listed in Ephesians 6, because your enemy doesn't rest. Your unseen enemy does not rest. And he does use human pawns. But the real warfare is the unseen world. Power against power. Satan knows he's lost. Jesus already attained the victory. But like I said, I think it was the last time we went live, he still has a lease on this land, a lease on this planet, and until it runs out, he's going to stay on the attack. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. I like to add the gospel now. So that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Now this is a little different version than King James, obviously. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Notice what God tells the people. Arise, go. I repeat, arise, go. Every place your foot treads I have given you. Also notice what he does not say. He does not say he will wipe their enemies out before they get there. Wouldn't that be nice? But that was not what was promised. He does not say he will wipe their enemies out before they get there. For reasons I don't understand, God leads them into battle, which will require former slaves to pick up swords. Pragmatically, this meant that God is requiring these people who have never seen a battle. Remember, all their parents caused nothing but grief. Disobedient, unbelieving. They saw all the plagues. They saw how God delivered them. They saw the Red Sea crashing in on the Gulf of Aqaba, the most powerful army in the then known world. They saw water come from a rock. They saw miracle after miracle, but they would not trust God. As soon as the opportunity came across their path to put their trust in God, they did just the opposite. They're a rebellious bunch. Now, their children has the opportunity to go in and do what their parents wouldn't do. And that is to trust God, first and foremost. Pragmatically, this meant that God's requiring these people who had never seen a battle, much less be in one, to walk in the midst of giants. Not only not ever seen a battle, they got to battle giants who practice battle as a way of life, believing that God would do what He said. Notice, God doesn't just mow down the inhabitants with lightning bolts from heaven so the Israelites arrive and just step over the bodies. He requires that His people exercise the authority He has given them. He promises He won't ever leave them or forsake them, and tells them more than once to be strong and courageous. Lastly, He tells them to do something amazing, and it's not sharpen swords. He tells them to do something amazing, and it's not sharpen swords or practice tactics or march in formation. He tells them to do exactly what Moses commanded them to do them in the law, to meditate on the law day and night, and never let it leave their mouth, doing everything written in it. Now, we don't have that obligation. Christ delivered us from that. But nevertheless, we do have faith opportunities. We do have loving one another. We do have the unbelievable opportunity to bring the gospel to people that need it so dearly, whether they understand that or not, or whether they want to believe it or not. The world needs Jesus. Does it strike you as strange that God's battle plan for His people is His word? Remember, when you go through Joshua 1, 2 through 9, to remind you what I just read to you, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that's written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have good success. And that's what this also is referring to. Now, as Christians, it's hard for us to sometimes believe that Christ has already attained the victory for our souls, for our salvation. We know that we are citizens not so much of this earth, but more importantly for the one that is coming in the future. Some will graduate and become a heavenly citizen. Some will be raptured and will be part of what God does with new heavens and new earth in the future. Well, I don't know what to put my faith in every day. What kind of faith opportunity do I have? Well, first and foremost, I already told you many times over that every day you wake up, I would acknowledge what Christ has done for you, and as a reminder for you, speak it out. Just don't think that the thought. Speak it out. Express it to God, your Savior, in appreciating and thankfulness that He has given you light, and now you have sight of what is the most important thing in your existence. And that is what He's done for you and the opportunity He has given you to be part of something special. You're a part of His A-team. Do you realize how many people will regret at the judgment seat of Christ of the rewards they missed out? Yes, they obtained eternity, but they missed out on rewards because they were sideliners? I've been trying to tell you for over 16 years, stop participating. Well, they're not really participating, but stop sitting on the sidelines. You're going to be missing out. Not just here on this planet, but more importantly, what is to come in the future? Inexhaustible rewards. I've said it so many times that you probably could preach it back to me better than I preach it to you. Let's continue. God doesn't just mow down the inhabitants with lightning bolts from heaven so that the Israelites arrive and just step over bodies. He requires that His people exercise the authority He has given them. He promises He won't ever leave them or forsake them, and tells them more than once to be strong and courageous. Lastly, He tells them to do something amazing. And it's not sharpen swords, practice tactics, or march in formation. He tells them to do exactly what Moses commanded them in the law, to meditate on the law day and night and never let it leave their mouth, doing everything written in it. Does this strike you as strange that God's battle plan for His people is His word? In the days that follow, Joshua commands the sun to stand still, which it does, and the Israelites defeat the 5 Amorite kings, not the least of whom is the king of Jerusalem. Adoni-Zedek, after the battle, king of Jerusalem, Adoni-Zedek. After the battle, Joshua opens the cave where he's holding the kings and parades them in front of the people. When he has done so, he calls all men of Israel and chiefs of the men of war and says, "Come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings." After they have done so, Joshua says, "Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and courageous. For thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight." Before you feel so bad for these giants and these other kings, these were all Moloch worshippers. These were evil individuals that God gave opportunity for hundreds of years to turn, but refused. They decided to follow false gods with horrible practice, including sacrificing their own babies and children. Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and courageous, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight. Joshua then kills the king and hangs their bodies in the sun where the people can see them. Also notice that nothing about their situation has changed. The land is still populated by giants, and the giants are bigger, stronger, and there's more of them there than fighting Israelites. Lastly, notice the single condition for victory. The people must fight. The people must fight. War is required. God demands of it His people. For some reason, He requires His people to stand in and exercise the authority He has given them, and that battle plan, which includes walking the land populated by giants and meditating on His word, never letting it leave their mouth. I believe God requires the same from you and me today, and so do I. The struggle was real then. It's real today. You and I are not walking into a land covered up in giants, but we are walking into a land of promises, His Word, and the requirement He made of them. He makes us believe, obey, and do. Well, that was kind of a whitewashed way of putting it, but we're not living in a land of giants. But we're living in a land that has far more evil people than these Israelites ever were exposed to. People that have been demonized. People that are carrying out Satan's agenda as human pawns. The same evil in the unseen world still exists there too. But guess what? So is the faith opportunities to take on the giants. So is the opportunity to run towards the battle instead of away from it. Let me skip along here because I'm going to run out of time. The connection I'm trying to make in this, in the same way the nation of Israel walked into war that they had not started, you were born into a world at war. While I believe this story is absolutely true, I also believe it is a type and model for us. That means, whether you like it or not, when you open your eyes on planet Earth, you did so on the battlefield caught between two powers. The King of the kingdom of heaven is extending his reign into and through and over the kingdom of darkness. You and I are caught in a crossfire, charged with advancing the kingdom, and the ruler we worship will determine which kingdom we advance. Why do we wake to a world at war? Why do we open our eyes to bullets whizzing overhead? Again, I don't know. Well, I do know. Surprised this author said that. Why do we wake a world at war? Because sin still exists. Sinful people are in greater numbers than ever. If anything, the war is raging hotter than ever before. And I have told you many times over, up until the moment that Jesus returns, it's not going to get easier. For the Christian, the true Christian. Just the opposite. The intensity will increase. Because we are Satan and his evil minions' true enemies. And he's going to fight hard. I believe there will be a day where you do understand. You can understand it now. Until then, you and I have a choice, and it's a simple one. Join in or bury our heads in the sand. That I agree with. In my experience, most of us bury our heads. And in my experience, not fighting does not take you out of the fight. It makes you an easy target. That's one of the best things that this author has said up to this point. In his experience, not fighting does not take you out of the fight. It makes you an easy target. I have come to believe that life is warfare. Every day you and I wake up in a world with an enemy who's as real as the page you hold in your hand, who hates us with an evil hatred, and whose singular desire is to murder us and separate us from our Abba. This is why Peter says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. That's in 1 Peter 5:8. Notice the three words, your enemy and devour. When I've taught this, it's about here the objections surface. That's always been the point. Remember when Jannes and Jambres spoke of the finger of God? When the Pharisees witnessed Jesus casting out demons, they accused him of having a demon that allowed him to do so. In response, Jesus said, quote, "But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you." End of quote. That's in Luke 11:20. Jesus was linking himself with the power that delivered Israel from bondage. He is that power. He is also opening their eyes to the reality of the struggle they are facing. We like to make much of David cutting off Goliath's head, and we should. But what happened on that field that day wasn't simply about a boy with a sling and a giant with a sword. It was a contest of powers. This is why Goliath said, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Notice David's response. "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the air, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with the sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." Goliath cursed David by his gods. This was commonplace in battle. But watch how David responded. "I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel." This was a battle of heavenly powers played out on earth. David knew this. Goliath knew this. Goliath simply chose the wrong and weaker power. Also notice what happened next. And it's this part that we need to pay close attention to. When the Philistine arose and drew near to meet David, listen, I've been saying this for years. David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. Keep that in mind. David ran quickly toward the battle line. I think I'll end it there. In 2022, don't expect me to run away from the battle, but charge ahead into it if it's for the cause of Christ. Not just any battle, but one that's for the cause of Christ, because those are the ones that matter. It is so true. This is a contest of powers in the unseen world. We know who's victorious. Like this author said about Goliath, he just happened to choose the weaker power. Satan and his minions are the weaker power. The God in us is the ultimate power. And he will provide the strength and the ability for whatever purpose in 2022 he has for you to accomplish. What if you're sick? Same God that defeated Goliath through the hands of David could heal you. What if you're homeless? Same answer. It doesn't matter the situation you're in. Realize you're in a contest of powers. You've been chosen to be an instrument for God's purposes to advance his agenda. The choice is yours, whether you want to sit on the sidelines or you want to run towards that battle wherever it's at and say, "Count me in, Jesus." I wanted to say something, but it would probably be taken the wrong way, so I won't say it. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Count me in, Jesus. And let's take off some heads. And I'm not talking about physically doing it. I'm talking about the spiritual warfare that we face on the battlefield of life. And that's the way I think we should approach 2022. Not backing away from the fight, but running towards it. Let me know if that's what you're going to do. Play the song.